6 teams remain, 5 games remain, but one constant sentiment stays the same. This is March.
This is March. Chicken vodka wrap is to die for.
Welcome to Stuff with Jon Rothstein. Best player you don't know in college basketball.
We have a very high bar on this show. If I let myself go, I'd be 400 pounds. I just want to make sure I don't go all in on chocolate chip pancakes at the diner down the street.
Forget about not sleeping until May. I may not sleep at all, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else. College hoops. Everything else is just secondary.
Who's ready to nosh? Welcome to Stuffed with Jon Rothstein. Day 19 here in the bubble in Indianapolis. You can see, obviously, my controlled environment as I'm here in the bubble getting ready to cover some Elite Eight games later today in Indianapolis. We obviously have Gonzaga taking on USC and UCLA taking on Michigan, but we are going to get you everything we need to know right now in a New York Minute. And we start, obviously, with the games last night that occurred throughout, obviously, the college basketball cycle in the Elite Eight as Houston and Baylor advanced to the Final Four. Baylor to the Final Four for the first time since 1950. Houston is in a situation now where it went back to a Final Four for the first time since 1984 with Hakeem Olajuwon. They lost that game, obviously, to Georgetown in the 84 National Championship game, but major history being made there. And tonight, we have obviously some fascinating matchups. Looking at the Blue Bloods on one side, you've got UCLA against Michigan, an unlikely UCLA team. And then we also have Gonzaga against USC. So besides that, how do we dig deeper? Well, let's do that right now as we get set and I wait for my Grubhub order. Got to check the phone, though. Got a couple of text messages here before I started. We are on a breaking news cycle. Nothing breaking right now, but we have been known to break news here on Stuffed. So let's get right now into what's going on in the NCAA tournament. I want to touch on everything that's going on in the coaching carousel later as well. Yesterday's games, we're going to start with Baylor against Arkansas. First, let's talk about, obviously, the bottom line, and that's Baylor was older, Baylor was bigger, Baylor was stronger. And I want to point this out. In a day and age now where immediate eligibility, and we're seeing it day by day with what's happening with the transfer portal, has become really something that's paramount in intercollegiate athletics. Baylor dominated and I thought won the game late last night because of the age and the maturity and the guys on its roster. Davion Mitchell, redshirted after transferring from Auburn. Maceo Teague, redshirted after transferring from UNC Asheville. Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua, redshirted after transferring from UNLV. And Adam Flagler, obviously redshirted after transferring from Presbyterian. One of the big things that I'm learning day in, day out, especially being here, seeing the NCAA tournament up close, is that you have to be really, really good, obviously, to advance in the NCAA tournament. But you also have to have things fall in your way. When Scott Drew led Baylor to the Elite Eight in the 2 previous trips since he was the head coach of the Bears, Baylor lost to the eventual national champion. Duke in 2010, Kentucky in 2012. Arkansas is an outstanding team, but Baylor obviously, and I said this prior to the tournament, did not have to deal with vintage blue bloods in the NCAA tournament. Same thing I've talked about with Gonzaga, and we'll get to Gonzaga here in a little bit. And then Houston, on the bottom right of your bracket, again, got to the Final Four for the first time since 1984. A relentless and tenacious performance on the glass by the Cougars, especially Justin Gorham, who has really transformed Houston, and he has been their tremendous utility guy on the inside. Now, if you look, and again, when I talk about luck and timing, it also relates to the Houston Cougars. Houston won its first-round game against Cleveland State. It then was able to come back and win a game against Rutgers, which with 5 or 6 minutes left to go, didn't look like it was going to be in a position to win. It then played another double-digit seed, Syracuse, in the Sweet 16, and then took out a 12 seed to get to a Final Four. But Kelvin Sampson joined some pretty elite company on Monday night because Kelvin Sampson became one of 5 active head coaches to lead multiple programs to the Final Four. The other 4, Roy Williams, John Calipari, Rick Pitino, and Bob Huggins. That is special company. And again, there are different elements to this. Obviously, we always think about things from a coaching perspective. We think about things, obviously, as they pertain to the sport. But, the one thing I've noticed from being around Houston's program the last couple of years, and I was fortunate to do a Men of March series episode for CBS Sports a couple of years ago with Kelvin Sampson, where you spend, an extended period of time around that program. And the biggest thing that I took away from that trip was Kelvin Sampson has two things in his life: basketball and family. And you can see, obviously, his son Kellen is the head coach in waiting. His daughter Lauren is obviously a key part of that staff for Houston. And to see the three of them embrace last night after Houston finally punched a ticket to go to a Final Four, you could really, if you're human and if you enjoy, obviously, a great storyline, it was hard not to get caught up in that moment. That was a really, really special moment. And again, if you think about the bigger things, that's what it stands for. And I also want to look at now, as we look big picture, we have a situation in the Final Four on the right side of your bracket where you have two teams from Texas, Baylor and Houston, in a situation where they're going to go head-to-head and have a chance to play for a national championship. And this should not be lost on anybody about how rare this is. Because I look at it and I see a situation where, you have teams that are at bat to win a national championship. And I've been saying this really all season. This is the year of the outlier in college basketball. We didn't have vintage Kansas. We didn't have vintage North Carolina. You definitely didn't have vintage Duke or Kentucky. The window is never more open for one of these programs to break through and win a national championship. Now, if you look at the tournament right now from 30,000 feet out, it looks like Gonzaga and Baylor are on a collision course to meet and play for a national championship. They were obviously two teams that were supposed to play right here in Indianapolis in December. The game was canceled due to COVID-19. That's things that, you wonder if a higher power is going to put that game in place. But I'll tell you, from being here now as long as I have, and again, this is day 19, and, I'm supposed to 7 days from now be on a plane back to New York, you have a different feeling about what everybody is going through in terms of the sacrifices that are being made and the mental stamina that is needed to really have a situation to flourish at a high level. Because I just want to tell you, for the folks at home right now who think they're just watching the NCAA tournament, this is a different type of situation. And kudos to the NCAA, kudos to Dan Gavitt and that team for putting everything in place to have a successful NCAA tournament. Knock on wood, we finished strong here. But this is an isolating deal. For me personally, I haven't been able to leave my hotel room unless I was going to the convention center in Indianapolis or unless I was going to Lucas Oil Stadium. Those are the three places I've been for 19 days. You obviously cannot walk on the street. You have to take an NCAA certified shuttle to each place. When you think about the controlled environment that these teams are in, a lot of people talk about, going to a Final Four, going to a Sweet 16, all the great dinners you can have, walking on the street, seeing people in transit. None of those things exist. This is all being done in a very, very tight situation that's really feels like within, the square footage or the radius of maybe 4 to 5 New York City blocks. That's how enclosed everything is. It's a much different situation. And if you're not here, it's really hard to understand that. So I look at the teams that have advanced so far to the Final Four, and I talk about Baylor and I talk about Houston, and I see two incredibly mentally tough teams. Two teams that, again, are built to block out noise. And I think you saw that last night. Arkansas battled back. Arkansas punched Baylor back. And kudos to Eric Musselman on a tremendous season, taking Arkansas to the Elite Eight for the first time since the mid-90s. But the mental toughness and the mental stamina of Baylor, just like you saw in the second half against Villanova, was too much for Arkansas. And as far as Houston goes, I think, we need to look at where this program was when Kelvin Sampson took it over. I saw something on Twitter earlier today that 5 years ago, he was walking around the Houston campus with a megaphone, begging and pleading for different students to go to the Houston home games. That's pretty powerful stuff. So we have two teams in the Final Four. And as I mentioned in the opening, we have a scenario where we've got two other Elite Eight games today, and they're going to be later today, and they're heavyweight matchups. They're matchups that get, the casual sports fan excited. They're matchups that get you excited, again, if you want to dig your heels in, obviously, order a 6-pack of Modelo, get the nachos from your favorite bar, and just check in for your recliner for 4.5 hours. So we have right now a scenario where right after Indiana hires a head coach who arrived in Bloomington in 1976, the same year that Indiana went undefeated, we have a team in Gonzaga that is 3 wins away from being right now the first undefeated team that college basketball has seen since the Indiana Hoosiers in 1976 under Bob Knight. And I have done, obviously, all sorts of looks at this team throughout the season. And I'm curious right now if USC has the requisites to push the Bulldogs. Because I look at Gonzaga right now, and I see a team whose ceiling is just higher than everybody else's. A team that right now plays offense effortlessly. A team right now that doesn't look like it's running offense so much as it's really just having target practice at the rim on each and every possession. Now you have a situation where you look at Gonzaga against USC, and you've got one great offensive team against the team in USC that has been elite defensively. And the biggest reason why they've been elite defensively, Evan Mobley at the front of the rim. Now, Evan Mobley is going to create an unbelievable dynamic for Drew Timme in this game, who feels like he plays often without breaking a sweat. So how does Drew Timme match up with Evan Mobley? And can Gonzaga shoot the ball well enough where it's going to go over the top of USC's defense? Because the interior defense of Evan Mobley and Isaiah Mobley, Chavez Goodwin, all these guys for USC, is going to make things difficult for Gonzaga in the paint. It's going to be Gonzaga's perimeter that controls the game. Now, another thing to keep in mind is this. I look at Gonzaga, and I see a team, again, that hasn't been in close games this season. I see a team, again, that, was down 12 against BYU in WCC title game, came back, gathered itself, won the game. Could say the same thing about the West Virginia game in December, although Jalen Suggs was lost in that game. The key to an upset is, can you get the favorite to start emotionally cracking in the NCAA tournament? And that, to me, is the biggest key in this game. Can USC get a situation where they take a lead, or where they put Gonzaga in a situation late where they're emotionally cracking because of the pressure? USC's roster composition, in a lot of ways, is a look towards the future in college basketball, because we're seeing it now with immediate eligibility for transfers that things are changing every single day in terms of personnel. I looked and did some numbers this morning. If 357 Division I teams all had a full allotment of scholarships, there would be 4,641 players on scholarship in Division I. A quarter of that number is already in the transfer portal, and it's not even April. This is still only March. So you have to ask yourself this question. Is USC's roster makeup, because in addition to the Mobleys and Ethan Anderson, this rotation is comprised of transfers on top of transfers. Is the USC roster makeup a look into the future of what we're going to see in college basketball? And a unique thing about USC is this. They have a guy in Taj Edey who transferred from Santa Clara last year, who in a lot of ways is an exception to the rule, because last season, 14 different mid-major players transferred from mid-major programs to power conference programs, and they averaged double figures in those mid-major programs, and none averaged in double figures when they went to the high major level. Taj Edey is an exception to the rule. He is playing better basketball statistically right now at USC than he did last season at Santa Clara. That is an incredible, incredible outlier. And then in the other national regional final tonight, other Elite Eight game, you've got two incredible brands, Michigan and UCLA. Both teams got here without being whole. Michigan does not have Isaiah Livers, has not had Isaiah Livers, will not have Isaiah Livers for the NCAA tournament. They have played beautiful basketball without him. Franz Wagner has bumped down and played some small ball 4. They've gotten great guard play from Eli Brooks, Mike Smith, and Sean D. Brown. And then UCLA is one of the, if not the most incredible story, I think, of this NCAA tournament, because here's a team that is down 60% of its projected starting lineup. UCLA lost a player in Dacian Nix, a 5-star recruit that was a Jalen Suggs caliber recruit. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be Jalen Suggs, one of the top picks in the draft, but would have had one-and-done type potential. Dacian Nix opted to go to the G League instead. Chris Smith, who entered the NBA draft process last year, was in a situation where he came back as UCLA's best returning player, and he tore his ACL in December. Now you have a situation where he did not get into a scenario where he was able to finish out his senior year. That's a scenario that's hard to deal with. Now, Jalen Hill, their best defensive big man, does not get into a scenario where he wants to stay with UCLA and he leaves the team for personal reasons. So you got 60% of your projected starting lineup out. Didn't stop, obviously, UCLA. UCLA wins in the first 4 against Michigan State in a game they easily could have lost. Beats BYU in the round of 64. Then takes advantage of obviously playing Abilene Christian instead of Texas. And then wins an incredible game, the game of the tournament, against Alabama in the Sweet 16. Very, very unique circumstance. And now, if you're Mick Cronin, you're in your first Elite 8. It's about, and Juwan Howard's in his first Elite 8 too. He hasn't been coaching college as long as Mick Cronin. It's about trying to understand, I think, everything that goes in to a regional final. And that is real simple. That is maximizing the opportunity. There's so many great coaches that have gotten to an Elite 8 and not gotten over the hump. The late, great John Chaney, Gene Cady, Sean Miller went once at Xavier and 3 times at Arizona. And this is the game that coaches in 20 years of covering the sport have told me is the game that is filled with the most pressure. And again, you got 2 great ones tonight. Gonzaga, USC, Mark Few trying to get to his second Final Four. Juwan Howard and Mick Cronin and Andy Enfield trying to get to the first. And this is the game, if you win it, that gets you in to a select club because you can say you coached in a Final Four. Mick Cronin, I've said time and time again, I never felt like he got the national credit for the job he did at Cincinnati. He's got it now. Without, again, 60% of his projected starting lineup, but that doesn't matter because you never know as a coach when you're going to get back to this situation. Doesn't matter if the roster is depleted. To join a select club, if you're Andy Enfield, Mick Cronin, and Juwan Howard, you got to win the game tonight. Now let's hear from you and get to our next segment, which is Don't At Me, Bro. First question comes from Kevin, and it's how can UCLA beat Michigan? By making them move on the court defensively, bringing Hunter Dickinson away from the basket, getting him moving, getting him in a situation where he's uncomfortable on defense, and using their skill with Bernard, Juzang, and Jaquez to keep Michigan's defense on their toes. Thomas Salgado says this UCLA team is making a deep run with many key pieces missing, with them being a young group. What do you see this team next year? Top 10 nationally. They're going to add Peyton Watson, a 5-star recruit. Now, again, things change literally hour by hour when it comes to transfers. But with that said, if UCLA brings everybody back intact, they're a top 10 team to start next season. Maybe top 5. You know? This comes from WVU. Do you anticipate changes to the transfer portal? If so, what will they be? My feeling is this. I think that the NCAA needs to add a notification date. And I totally understand, it's a time that we're giving players more rights and and they definitely should have a lot more rights. They should get the opportunity to benefit off their name, image, and likeness. I think when you look at the situation, I think, we got to have a notification date, whether it's May 1st, April 15th, where you have to let, obviously, your team know by. Next up, Josh Gallender, who are the top 10 transfers in the portal? I don't think I'm there yet, buddy, in terms of ranking transfers. I would say Noah Locke, Qudus Wahab come to mind for sure. This is from Pat, and he goes, will Duke pick up any transfers off season? If so, who do you think they will get? I will say this. This is built for the Blue Bloods to flourish. Duke, you've seen Kentucky add Kellen Grady from Davidson. They've also added Oscar Tshiebwe from West Virginia. This is built for the Blue Bloods to flourish. Next up. This is from Noah, and it's John. What are your expectations for Syracuse next season if they have everyone return? To be one of the better teams, I think, in the ACC and maybe a top 25 team. But here's the thing. Syracuse lost in the Sweet 16 to Houston the other night. I've already noticed, just following social media, that Kadari Richmond, Robert Braswell, already in the transfer portal. This is what we're dealing with right now. It's anarchy every single day. So Syracuse, I'm sure, and I think Jim Boeheim said this in his press conference, will have to recruit other transfers to take their place. And now what we're going to see is this. And I've spent, so much time, at recruiting events in the summer and watching, obviously, young kids, obviously, at the high school level, get ready, try and get a college scholarship. Those kids are going to seriously miss out on opportunities because college coaches now have the opportunity to get a transfer instead of a high school kid. And again, if you take a transfer, it's a one-time transfer rule, the kid can't leave a second time, and he also is in a situation where, for all intents and purposes, he is in a scenario where he wouldn't be able to leave, and the high school kid could. Have to remember that as well. Next question. This is from Mike Woodson. When will you decide Mike Woodson's Rothsteinism? Will you take suggestions? I definitely will. I want to get to the Indiana hire after we talk about this in a second. But I definitely will, I'm not going to force a Rothsteinism, but Mike Woodson definitely will obviously have people in the lab working on that for next season, the new head coach at Indiana, former head coach of the Atlanta Hawks and the New York Knicks. This is from Go Blue, and John, do you think Kentucky rebounds from this season? I think they have to, considering how poorly they performed, but this is going to be a complete revamp if you're John Calipari. This is going to be a total new situation if you're John Calipari. New team, they've added Kellen Grady. They're going to bring in a number of freshmen. Should get Keon Brooks back. You get Oscar Tshiebwe. It'll be interesting to see the other pieces that Calipari can add around the ones he's already brought in. Hairology 3.0 wants to know, very serious question, where can one get the best chicken parm? I love the chicken parm at Elio's on 85th and 2nd. Very, very thin, very, very light, very, very delicious. But also, if you go to Primola on 64th and 2nd, and I hope I can get back to these places when I get vaccinated and get back to New York, they make a chicken parm right now that's almost like, it looks like it's a plate, but you cut into it. Another place on 57th and 6th, Quality Italian, has a chicken parm pizza. So it looks like you order a pizza, but it's really a piece of chicken parm. Not the healthiest for you, but one of the more delicious dishes in all of Manhattan. So let's wrap this up right now with some nuggets as we nosh right here as I'm getting ready to order, a Cobb salad for about the 78th time since I've been here in Indianapolis for lunch. Here's the bottom line. The coaching carousel continues to spin. I'm keeping tabs right here with my list on everything that's been filled, what hasn't been filled. 3 major jobs are open. DePaul, Texas, and Oklahoma. Those are 3 major jobs. So you've got a scenario where Texas is obviously going to be centered on Chris Beard. His buyout is going to drop in a couple of days. Oklahoma, I can tell you from talking to multiple sources, wants to hire a proven head coach with pedigree. DePaul right now appears to be restarting things a little bit in terms of their search. The big hire, though, that we saw, and there's been a number of them. Obviously, Shaka Smart was huge to Marquette, but the biggest job that was filled was Mike Woodson going to Indiana. And this was something that we had seen, rumored for a long time. We had seen, obviously, a lot of discussions about Indiana possibly trying to do what Michigan did, with Juwan Howard. I spoke to Mike Woodson 2 nights ago when he got, on the ground here in Indiana. He was going from Indianapolis to Bloomington to meet with the players. And there are no secrets that in college basketball you need great players to have a chance to win, because in any sport you need great players to have a chance to win. The coaching aspect, he has obviously got down pat. He's taken 2 teams in the NBA to the playoffs, the Hawks and the Knicks. But it's going to come down to, if you're Indiana, feeling connected to the fan base and connected to the past. And that, to me, is what Indiana fans wanted, and it's what Indiana wanted to do, because talking to other people who were involved with this job, who had ties to Indiana's family, even if they didn't get the job and Mike Woodson did, they were happy that an Indiana guy was the person who was chosen to be cemented in place. And, I'm looking forward to continuing to cover that situation as it moves forward, because it's unique to see if Michigan's rival in the Big Ten, Indiana, after emulating what they tried to do. Now, I know Juwan Howard and Mike Woodson are not the exact same. Juwan Howard's with the Miami Heat. He had never been in college. Mike Woodson's never been in college. They're not the exact same age, but it's the same type of fabric and model. If the rival of Michigan can do the same thing and have comparable success, that we will be tracking moving forward here the rest of the way. So we got 2 Elite Eight games tonight. Gonzaga against USC, great offense against great defense. Michigan against UCLA, 2 blue bloods. UCLA's got to obviously do a good job against Hunter Dickinson on both sides of the floor. And again, remember, in the airport of life, college basketball is the Delta Sky Club. So stay positive, test negative, and we'll be back talking to you real soon. For 2 more days, this is March.